Detroit.
Hello ladies and gentlemen, Jerry, I'm Dan the Movie Man, and today I'm reviewing Catherine Bigelow's new film, Detroit. Detroit is notoriously known in America for being constantly turbulent. You know, anyone who's listened to an Eminem song knows just how kind of a dump Detroit can be. Catherine Bigelow has decided to focus on a particular time in Detroit, specifically 1967 with the race riots. But not only is Catherine Bigelow focusing on the race riots, but she is focusing on a particular night during the race riots of 1967, the Algiers motel incident. The film is directed by Academy Award-winning director Catherine Bigelow and is written by Academy Award-winning screenwriter Mark Boal and stars John Boyega, Anthony Mackie, Will Poulter, as well as many other actors in this fantastic ensemble cast film. The film then begins with an animated sequence that is meant to provide exposition as to how black people came to live in Detroit, as well as how the riots initially started, but ultimately fails at doing that, and all it really does is provide an animation that looks nice, but is really out of place in this gritty movie that Catherine Bigelow has aimed to create. After the animated sequence, we then cut to a police raid of this sort of abandoned warehouse / unofficial all black bar. And after seeing the film and then researching, it was this that initially fueled the riots, and the fact that black people were being really poorly treated in normal bars to the point where they thought, screw it, let's create our own ones. And then when those were raided and taken away from them, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's how the riots, I think, started. And the film, and already having seen this film, it's been less than 5 minutes, and you're already thinking this could have been so much better. You know, they could have actually conveyed this information in a way that the information is actually conveyed. You know, because I'm still unaware as to how these riots even started, because that's another thing about this film. The film throws you in the deep end. It's you don't really know these characters' names. Because I remember watching this film, and it got to the end when they give you the sort of the written thing of what happened to every character after the event. At the end of it, and I was sat there I have no idea who this character is, no idea because it doesn't. The film really need to kind of probably show the actual person's photo along with the actor, because because this film, you don't know the characters' names. You know their faces, you know whose side they're on and everything like that, but you don't know their names, except for Larry, who's kind of the protagonist of this film in a way, or becomes it. You don't know any of these characters. Catherine Bigelow is no stranger to kind of strong accusations that are kind of controversial, and I think this film is probably not her most controversial, but the one that people think call her out probably most on. As I said, this film throws you in the deep end, and immediately we are met with an obvious bias. This film has a very strong bias against the Detroit police, because she really represents the Detroit police as not just racist police officers, although she does have some that are actually kind of level-headed, and are actually saying to the actual police officers, saying to the other police officers, "Are you racist?" Or they're not all bad, and that's what I think that's what I think that it does well in not saying that all people are like this, but it really does convey the racist police officers as horror villains. They are things that even you are fearful of when watching it. There's a sequence in which during a motel, some people have a chance to escape, and it's treated almost like a sort of a horror sequence. Because when they see a police officer, you're kind of even you kind of don't go there kind of thing. It's you kind of react in the same way as if you saw some kind of monster sort of walk past. And the terror that is created from this is really well done by Catherine Bigelow and her directing style, as well as the actors that are portraying these cops. Will Poulter shines in this film as like the main ringleader of the like the racist police, you know. And this is a real like surprise because was it Will Poulter made a name for himself in like firstly British comedy, and then went on to America in films like Weird and Millers, you know. So he made a name for himself as like this like lovable idiot in comedy, and then to see him in such a disturbing and diabolical role is such a drastic juxtaposition that really impresses, and like he is simply disturbing in this film, and the entire cast is also fantastic. The other cops do really well in it, as well as everyone else in the film, because like no one's given star status. Everyone is treated, you know, like kind of by the production team, and in this film as, you know, actors and like, you know, as characters. You know, Anthony Mackie's in this film, but he's not given any you know, special treatment. He's playing a character. You don't really look at these people and think, oh, that's John Boyega, or that's you know, Will Poulter. You're kind of just sort of sucked in, and you're seeing these characters, and that's something that makes the film really engaging and really gripping. Is you're not kind of detached by seeing a star. You're actually kind of seeing characters, and that's really engaging and gripping from my perspective. As I've said, these cops are like horror villains, and this whole film is almost like a torture porn horror film. Like, it is traumatizing to watch, and that's what Catherine Bigelow did so right with this film. Is that she, like, with her documentary kind of style of filmmaking, it makes this film it makes the film even more hard hitting, because you kind of feel like you're watching something that actually happened, because, you know, this did actually happen. This is a true event, although not all the facts are there. This is an event that happened. You know, like the police stormed this house looking for this gun, looking for a gun that wasn't there. Three black people died by the police's hands. Whether or not you know, provoked or not, you know, it's still up in the air, because there's still holes in the story. But Bigelow is fantastic in creating this really disturbing film. Like, it's really hard to watch. Like, I think this has been the hardest film to watch all year. This has been scarier than all the horror films I've seen this year, and this has lasted with me like more like than you know, any horror film this year. Although we had some good ones. This all being said, this film does have some flaws. I still have my same issues with Catherine Bigelow's directing style, as in this film I think featured by far her worst use of handheld camera. This is because in a couple of shots, especially the one where Fred tries to go to work, handheld camera and zoom, because they use zoom in this film a lot, which adds to the documentary feel but also lessens the quality, that actually loses its subject that it's meant to be filming. Like, there's a number of shots in this film that the camera physically loses what it's filming. Like, it because it's so zoomed in and so shaky, that it's even, because when it's zoomed in it's even more shaky. You know, it's even more sensitive to movement. This is by far Catherine Bigelow's worst use of a handheld camera, but then again, I had a problem with that in The Hurt Locker. Not so much in Zero Dark 30, but this is by far the worst use of that not so great technique. Also, John Boyega's character felt a bit pointless to me. Like, he felt almost fictional because of how little he does in this film, but he actually is real. Like, in the end, when they you know, they have the writing of what happened to every character after the event, his character is, you know, given exposition as to what happened afterwards, and so I kind of let it slide, because you know, the guy was real, you know, and so he must have, you know, he couldn't really do anything. What this was more an opportunity for John Boyega to act in such a subtle way, rather than actually do much, because his character, he is a black law enforcement officer, and so this guy is kind of got his foot either side of the fence, you know, although obviously his you know, his loyalty, like, I know, his heart and soul is with the black residents of Detroit. He still is a police officer, and so he still has a job to do. And so throughout the film, he's kind of watching what Will Poulter and the racist police are kind of doing in this film. And you can see in his face, it's all facial. All his acting is facial, and it's you can see how angry and upset and disturbed he is, but he can't allow them to see that. And John Boyega does really great with that. It's just a shame that I think his character, he could have had a character that maybe did more. He could have maybe been one of the people affected by this, because he is affected, but he could have been one of the residents in the motel at the time that got caught up in this event. But that aside, the biggest issue with this film is the lack of context and information, or the poor communication of that information to the audience. This film has a very strong bias, as I've already said, and it's very damning of the Detroit police. Like, it has a very strong bias against them, and this the film tries to portray this event in a way to kind of convict these people who weren't convicted, and it does have the evidence. That's the thing, is that this film has enough evidence to damn and lock these guys away nowadays. But at the same time, the film has enough flaws and holes within it to get that evidence dismissed. Although true to life, because all of the survivors' recounts were rather hazy, there are more flaws than there were initially. Like, as I said with the opening, it doesn't really tell you how the riots started. This film is just very poor at delivering information. It's like there's a lot of like factual information that the film could, tell the audience about, and it either doesn't tell you or does it so poorly, and that's probably an issue of the script. By far the worst actual instance of this. This film has, as I said, a strong bias, and at the end of the film it has a disclaimer saying that like, we do not have all the facts, like, this is a work of fiction, or like the whole disclaimer at the end basically cover their ass, and to me that felt like a real chicken out, because this film like is really like strong in its accusations. It's like saying the Detroit police, these men, they did this, they were brutal, they were torturing these people mentally and physically, they were killing them, they didn't care about their if these people lived or died, they just, like, all they wanted to do was just cause pain and harm to these people, and at the end to kind of just go, yeah, we don't know if this happened or not, though. It kind of took away from the entire film you'd seen, and I really didn't like that at all. Like, they probably needed to have a disclaimer, but they could have probably worded it in a way that didn't feel like such a cop-out. If I was to rate this film out of 10, it'd be about 7 or 8 out of 10. I'm probably going to say 8 out of 10 just because of how brilliant that hour and a half Algiers motel sequence was, because of how fantastically directed it was by Catherine Bigelow, as well as how well acted it was by its entire ensemble cast. But yeah, overall, Detroit is a traumatic and very hard-hitting movie that will stay long after you've seen it. Although really well directed and acted, its script does have many holes within it. The screenplay does get a bit comical with its bias at points. Like, you'll have some people be like, "Who could do something like this?" Like, there's some really ham-handed lines that it just kind of detaches you from it. That happens very occasionally, and also the script fails to deliver a lot of context and information that is kind of needed in this film, although I am aware that the accounts of survivors of this event are very hazy. So yeah, that's my review of Detroit. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and goodbye.